front door slammed shut with a force that could have busted its hinges. She knew it had to be Frank. "I'm back here," she yelled, "in the kitchen." Rose quickly topped off her glass with a little more gin and covered it with some slimline tonic and lit another cigarette. She blew the smoke out of the side of her mouth and fixed her face so it wouldn't show nothing, disappointment or anger. Frank's sharp profile appeared in the doorway. He just stood there leaning against the door jamb, watching her, not saying an effing word. She always hated him when he applied the silent treatment, but she figured everyone have different ways they fight. "So," she opened, "is it done? Why don't you pull up a chair and join me in a drink?" "Christ, it's barely noon," cracked Frank, a little sneer spreading across his tight lips. "You're starting in pretty early today." Rose shrugged. "How much you get?" Frank said nothing. Just took off his jacket and cap, threw them on the counter, pulled out a kitchen stool and plonked himself down. "I'll have a beer," he said, his dark eyes piercing into her. Rose stubbed out her cigarette and shuffled over to the fridge. "You want a special brew or a Stella?" "Give me a can of both, and bring the whiskey in a glass." Rose did what Frank said and slid the beers and bottle in front of him. "I was thinking," said Rose, "now that we're flush, maybe we could take a little holiday, a weekend getaway somewhere, like we used to." "Jesus Christ," erupted Frank. "The check ain't even cleared and you're already spending it." Rose lit up another tab and let the silence ease into the space between them. "Remember that time we spent the weekend in Silloth? Remember how the clouds and rain cleared and the sun came out all bright and hazy? And that rainbow stretched right across the horizon. It was so beautiful. I can still see it now like it was yesterday. You bought me ice cream. Mint chocolate chip. My favorite. And we sat on the grass like teenagers, watching the waves crash against the shore. That was the best time ever. Do you remember it, Frank? Why do you always live in the past? We got real shit to deal with right here, right now. Ain't no good burying your head in the sand, Rose." "You get another job," she said, touching his arm. "You'll see. Things will come around." Frank jerked his arm away, and Rose noticed another tattoo there. "You got some new ink." "What's it to you?" "Show me. Let me see what you got." Frank hesitated a moment, then pulled back his sleeve and turned his arm over. "An orchid? Why'd you get that flower? Why not a rose, huh?" Frank rolled his eyes and cracked open the beer. "Is it for that stupid Asian bitch, the cow you were two-timing me with?" Frank looked down the end of his nose at Rose and shook his head slowly from side to side. "Don't mess with me, Rose, not today. Not ever, understood?" Frank reached inside his pocket, pulled out a pile of crumpled bank notes, chucked them across the table at her. "There, that's your share, 150. Rose stared at the money, then at Frank's tattoo. "You said you was through. You swore to me, Frank." He pulled down his sleeve, downed the whiskey, and poured another. "Are you screwing her?" "Ain't none of your damn business." "None of my business?" And years and months and days and hours and infidelities, lies and violence all seemed to simmer up in that moment. And then that was it. Rose leaped up, grabbed her glass and launched it straight at Frank's face. He hit him hard, right between the eyes. He screamed, clutched at his gashed forehead, kicked the table over, then threw himself at her. Rose's head hit the wall with sheer force, splitting it open, while Frank's fingers clasped firmly round her throat, squeezing tighter and tighter. The sun was a glorious yellow orb floating in a speckless blue sky. Silloth was literally abuzz with people taking advantage of the unseasonably good weather. Couples, arm in arm, and families with kids in tow all strolled the promenade, watching the dinghies bob and roll on the gentle waves. The sun lapped against the shore, turning the pebbles over and over, then over and over again, creating an unhurried rhythm like life itself. The shrill voices of excited children rang out across the town square as they played football, tig, and hide-and-seek. And the ice cream van that had parked near the seafront had a huge queue waiting patiently for their sweet treats. And from her vantage point on a park bench on the green, Rose drank it all in, the tranquility, beauty, and familiarity. Half of her money had bought her a bus ticket from Carlisle to Silloth and a sweet little room in a B&B. Next to her on the bench was her empty ice cream tub. This time she'd gone for 2 flavors, mint chocolate chip and peach melba. Both were as satisfying, as good as she remembered. She knew they wouldn't discover Frank's body for a while, and by then it wouldn't matter anyway. And as the day began to wane and the sun began to set, the sky was awash with brilliant colors that slowly changed from bright yellows, dusty oranges, and finally to rosy hues. And as if the sunset was calling her by name, Rose slipped off her shoes, walked into the sea fully clothed, and slowly began swimming towards the point where the sun would finally sink beyond the horizon.